Hello, parents. One thing that teachers get asked a lot is, how can I help my child really develop a strong vocabulary? At the Teachers College Reading and Writing Project, I am especially interested in this question, particularly in our work with English language learners. But really, when it comes to academic language, when it comes to academic vocabulary, pretty much all our kids are English language learners, whether or not they grew up speaking English. One thing to remember is that a child will not go from not knowing a word at all to suddenly being taught this word and voila, now this child is magically using this word perfectly and independently. That seldom happens. Instead, a word is acquired gradually through multiple exposures. Some researchers argue that a child needs to encounter a word up to 14 times in a variety of contexts for that child to own the word. Other researchers say it's up to 17 times. The logical thing then is to use sophisticated vocabulary around kids and when talking to kids. Now, even though the bulk of language, the bulk of vocabulary is acquired rather than directly learned, there are a couple of simple, quick steps that you can take in the deliberate, direct instruction of a word. Step 1, make the child say this word out loud. It is one thing to hear that word being uttered by someone else, and a totally different experience actually enunciating that word yourself, getting the word in your mouth. That's a very important step in a child's owning of a word. Step 2, and this is particularly important for multisyllabic words, have the child clap out the word or tap out the word. For example, consequential or belligerent. This is not just a strategy we use for kindergartners. It helps learners of all ages to take a new word and hear the different word parts segmented in that way. Step 3, give an example or a description of the word. You don't need to have the precise definition at your fingertips. When I was a new teacher, I thought when a child asked me what a word meant that I had to be the Oxford English Dictionary and spew out a perfect, concise definition. That is not true. Simply hearing an example of how that word might be used in a situation is often very helpful. So for example, belligerent? A person who wants to pick a fight is belligerent. Somebody who's acting belligerently, you don't want to go to that person when you want help. Giving examples of situations in which that word might be used is helpful. The next step is to supply an opposite word for this word. So for example, belligerent, somebody who's not belligerent would be friendly, helpful. And if you have a pencil and a paper handy, and by the way, this doesn't need to be a vocabulary notebook. It could be the back of an envelope or a shopping receipt or any paper that you have handy. It helps to write that word out. And if possible, have your child write that word out. Not so that they can learn the perfect spelling, just so that they can see that word in print. That adds another layer of familiarity, and it helps with the sight recognition of that word. The next step is if you can have a quick doodle or a little image that connects with the word, something you look up on your phone, or maybe a little doodle that you have the child draw. Research has shown it really cements a child's long-term retention of a word if there is a little visual or an image attached. Last step, and this is an important one, try to thread that word in your conversation later that day or the next day or the following week so that your child hears that word uttered at a different time in a different context. That's so important for developing long-term retention and real familiarity with that word. The most important thing is to have a playfulness and a curiosity around words, to point out new and curious words when you encounter them, to encourage your child to say a word out loud and to pay attention to the root words or the different word parts, and of course, to actually have conversations with your child in which you are using a robust vocabulary.